Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sounds of the Diaspora. I'm really excited to have our guest tonight, a gentleman that I've known for many years, and we've played and toured all over the world together and have really developed an amazing relationship. And I just want you guys to give me the moment to introduce Mr. Paul Beaudry to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Paul, how you doing today?
Doing great. Doing even better to see you.
It's been a while, man. It's been a minute.
It has been a minute.
Yeah. So you just back in town, huh?
I just got back in town a few hours ago. I was on tour with Camille Thurman and Dale Green quartet, and we just got back in the other day. We've been playing through the Midwest and whatnot, and we've been playing all over the place. So it'll be nice to be in one time zone for about 24 hours.
and so I see you're located in New York City, right?
In Queens, New York, yeah. Forest Hills, New York City. Yep.
Yeah. How long you been in Queens?
Ooh, I want to say almost the whole time I've been in New York, 25 years.
Okay.
25 years, almost coming on 26 years, getting close to that. Yeah.
It's really interesting, cats come to New York and they find their niche. A lot of guys kind of gravitate towards Brooklyn, and not too many guys head out to Queens unless you're from New York. But
right.
I mean, personally, I stayed in Manhattan, and I loved it in Harlem. It was really nice.
Right. Yeah. Well, when I came into town, it was my son was born not too much longer after I came. Well, I was going to school at Queens College at first, and I always thought I was going to end up moving to Brooklyn or Manhattan. Yeah. But for whatever reason, it didn't happen, and it just kind of like, oh, I guess I'm here, because once you figure it out, you figure out how to get around, and you
get around. I'm about to say, because you're all over the place.
Move. Right. I mean, I'm in between both airports, between JFK and LaGuardia. If I need to get out of town, I can go, take the 95 up to Connecticut. So I'm like, I'm good.
Right. Prime location. So you've been in New York for 25 years. Before that, I know you went to Berkeley, right?
I went to Berkeley College of Music for a couple of years. And actually, what a lot of people don't know is I got my first degree in computer science, actually at California Polytechnic State University, which is in Central Coast, California. So that my first degree was actually in computers. And what had happened was, my folks didn't want me to go into music at all when I was a kid. I mean, they wanted me to be busy, just to be, not on the street doing crazy stuff, just like, let me keep this guy occupied and give him piano lessons or something, But I ended up liking it, which I think was not necessarily what they had in mind.
Right.
Like, oh no. So anyway, I did get my first degree in computers, but my mom's originally from South Central LA, and I used to go down to LA a lot, and I met Willie Jones when he was still playing with that band Black Note, and Marcus Shelby and the people that were part of that thing. That was kind of like they were starting to become like the Art Blakey of the West Coast. That's the way they were being set up at the time. And so I got to know a lot of the younger players from LA in the early 90s, Eric Reed, of people of that hang, and they ended up being closer to the LA players of that time, Danton Bowler, before they moved to New York. And then what happened is I was actually doing a summer internship at Apple Computer in 1995, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine saying that Willie Jones had just gotten the gig with Roy Hargrove. And that's when I quit computers. I said, I'll never do this again. If Willie's playing with Roy, I'm going to New York, man. I'm out of here.
You were inspired,
I never went back. I never went back. I said, no, I'm going to do that. I can't.
So when did you pick up the bass?
That's interesting, because I was a drummer all throughout junior high school and high school. And what ended up happening is that actually when I was getting my computer degree, I wasn't a music major. I didn't have access to a drum set, but I always wanted to practice. So I would practice bass, electric bass, and piano for years. And then finally, I just started getting good at the bass. I also wanted to start getting more into composing. And I was just hearing more harmonies and melodies and whatnot, and I wanted to play an instrument that was still close to the drums but was a little bit more involved in harmony. And so it was, for me, it was kind of a natural, I mean, everybody's different, but I was really feeling bass. And at the time I was listening to a lot of Marcus Miller and Jaco Pastorius, and I was like especially that Last Miles record, Amandla. is still like one of my favorite Miles Davis records of all time.
Mm.
And Marcus Miller plays so much amazing stuff on that. But I was getting deeper into jazz and deeper, I was listening to a lot of the acoustic music, and I'll never forget being in a classroom that was like a jazz appreciation or a jazz history class, and I had a professor who put on an LP, and it wasn't the first time I've heard this, but it was the first time that it hit me like this. It was the Miles Davis Kind of Blue record on LP, and Paul Chambers' bass sound. I was just like, I gotta play upright because I can't. I mean, and so I still go back and I play more upright than electric now.
Mhm.
But I'll just never forget, and to this day, Paul Chambers has been a big influence on my playing. I got lucky enough to meet Ray Brown. There was this thing at Stanford Jazz Workshop. They do something every summer in Stanford, and I was still living in the Bay Area at the time. Ray Brown was one of the people he was the main bass person for that particular week that I happened to attend. And Ray's like, you know what, you really need to study with John Clayton. So I started studying with John Clayton, and then that's when I really got deeper into. And he's a great classical player too. So I got deeper into classical just to get my bowing together, because John's like, you got to get your left hand together to get your sound, and also have an appreciation for that music.
Right.
Also for arranging and conducting, and just to make yourself a bigger musician. You never want to, shun a style that has greatness in it, especially something like that really teaches your instrument well. So I studied with John for many, many years. And even when I went to Berklee College of Music, I was still studying with John and hanging out with John. And so doing that, Ray Brown was also one of my main influences, because John always had me listening to Oscar Peterson records.
Right.
And through that, I think I also developed, not only ability to play really well with piano trios, but with a lot of vocalists. And somehow I just kind of became a lot of vocalists' favorite bass player. I hear melody, and so I always try to play melody when I'm playing. I always hear melody and what's going on. Even if I'm playing bass lines, I'm still playing melody. And so, so Ray Brown has been a big influence, and I had the fortunate advantage of, when I came to New York, I got a chance to study with Buster Williams for a little bit, and also with a number of other people, Rufus Reed as well, and then I started just trying to find as many greats as I can hang out with that I really wanted to learn from, like Richard Davis. I spent like a whole week with him. I just took, I was asking John Clayton, like, what should I do to study with Richard? He said, just buy a plane ticket and hang out with him for a week. So I did. I bought a plane ticket. Of course, I arranged it in advance. It took about 6 months to pull off. Richard had to have the time, but that's just the level of passion that I had about wanting to learn. It was just on that level. Just buy a plane ticket and just go. You don't need an institution to tell you what to do. You want to learn, then do it.
Yeah. Period. You got to put yourself in that situation and just, embrace it.
Right.
Well, I mean, ever since you came to New York, I mean, we met when you fairly early when you came to New York, and we played on a number of gigs together, and you always had that passion and that yearning, like a sponge to learn, and the conversations about the music and all of the things and opportunities that was happening. It's always been inspiring. And I know education has been a big thing for you as well.
Yeah.
Because
education
we work together. We work together in some of those situations, but performing, I think it goes hand in hand. I find it interesting, because a lot of cats that perform don't really want to teach, and I'm like, it goes hand in hand, because somebody taught you,
Right.
And if you go through the process the right way, what we call the apprenticeship, you have to sit and spend time with that person to learn.
I agree.
It wasn't just like, hey, read these notes and go learn this, learn these 2 5s or learn these licks and you'll be fine. It was relationship building, spending the time, making sure that you understand the culture of the music as well. That's all part of it.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I learned a lot from you. I mean, even just things about touring and being on the road and how to conduct yourself as a musician and whatnot. Because I remember when I had my biggest problem, I would always call Dion Parson. I'm like, this guy don't know what to do, But you raise a very good point. This music comes out of relationships.
Yeah.
It comes out of chemistry. It comes out of community. It comes out of, I mean, you got to, learn your instrument and everything, but the like you say, it comes out of culture and cultural connections,
Right.
and understanding the culture is as important as understanding the music. You can't separate those. So you don't understand the music unless you understand the culture. Even if you're trying to learn some J.S. Bach and you don't know anything about European history, you're not going to be able to play it right.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. It's a part of it.
It's like you're talking about, like, just traveling and being on the road, and the culture's like, you can have all the chops you have, but you got to have road chops as well. You got to understand, how to move and maneuver, and so there's a bunch of cats I know that don't get called to go on the road that often because they don't understand that. Because being on the road is a whole nother
it's a whole other thing.
Being at home and playing in town every weekend, it's just a whole nother thing. Yes. And when you go on the road, cats want to be comfortable that, you're going to be, you're going to check out on time. You're going to be, at the call on time. You're going to show up for the sound check.
That's right.
And you're in a different place almost every day.
Right.
And if you want to make the hang that night, you're responsible for coming back in on time, and all of the things, what I'm talking about.
And you were very helpful. You were very helpful putting me in place on that, because I was making those mistakes early in my career. And now I'm the old man doing that to other people. I passed the torch.
Right. We all had to learn. I was 21 years old the first time I went on the road, and I made some mistakes, but I learned. I was a quick learner. I was 21. The next oldest musician was in their 40s.
Wow.
So there was like a 20-year gap between
you had a lot to learn.
My first tour.
You had a lot to learn.
21 years old, still in college, and cats just looked at me and said, "Hey man, you got to figure it out.
You got to figure it out."
that was it. They was like, "You got to figure it out." And I lasted 3 weeks with them, and it's like, "Yeah,
now I get it.
We'll check you out." And 2 weeks later, I got a call like, "Hey, let's go back on the road." And I was like, "Okay, I guess I did all right." But. Yeah. It's all part of it. And like you made a good point. If you want to learn music from other cultures, you have to spend time there. If you want to learn Latin music, you gotta go to a Latin country. If you want to learn the tabla, you gotta go to India. It's all part of the process. But it's great because I see you as one of the cultural bearers of this music, taking it forward, because because it's a lot of young cats that they say they're playing jazz, but they're playing all kind of other stuff, and they don't embrace the tradition.
Right.
Learning the songs. I mean, we used to have these conversations like, "Hey man, let's learn these songs because we have to make sure we understand the jazz standards."
That's right.
Not too many young cats still embrace that.
And I think they're missing a lot of information if they don't. And we were talking about education earlier, and I think one of the reasons why I've always loved education as much as I love playing is because I struggled a lot when I really wanted to learn and didn't know, until I met people like Ray Brown and John Clayton and people on these levels, and maybe some people just before that. I had the passion, but I didn't know what to do. All I knew was I wanted, and for years, years would go by before I started meeting the people that would, teach me how to do that. Like even Jeff Chambers is a bass player in San Francisco, who was a great player. He played with Freddie Hubbard and a lot of other people as well. I had a classical teacher, Pat Clovis, and a guy named Ken Husted in San Luis Obispo. But, when you have that desire and you don't have that teacher there, sometimes you're not going to learn how to play. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, you can get to a certain point, but when you have someone who can connect you with that information so that you still have to put the work in, but you have the bridge to get from point A to point B, and then you can actually get there. For me, I want to be that person a lot for people to say, this is how you do this.
Oh yeah. Well, the good thing is you never stopped. So like, even though it took a while, I mean, you started later. Similar to my story, I grew up playing trombone. I took my first drum lesson in college, 18 years old. So I switched to drums in high school. So it wasn't until I got to Rutgers University that I got the information. Again, I was that kid that was asking, "Hey, how do I do this? How do I do it?" And everybody was like, "Man, we don't know. We're not drummers." So, but if I'm a firm believer in energy creates energy. So if you keep, if you keep asking those questions and pursuing and thinking about it, you will eventually get that information, and that's a good thing. You and I ended up on some really great teaching opportunities through Jazz and Lincoln Center for Jazz for Young People.
That's right.
And I eventually passed that torch on to you when I moved back to St. Thomas, and you did an amazing job teaching that. But that showed me your passion for the music and education. When I called you to do those gigs, I really, I was really happy. I made that call because I was like, and I knew I was getting ready to move to St. Thomas. So I was like, I could pass this on to this cat because he knows what to do.
Thank you. And I was able to keep that until the pandemic happened. And we ended up being one of the top bands in that program until the pandemic reorganized everything. But and then eventually, actually, I was doing so much teaching at the time during the pandemic itself. I ended up being a full-time public school music teacher in the New York City public school system. I did that for 3 years before, going back out on the road. As of now, I'm with Camille and Dale a lot, and TK Blue. I play with TK Blue a lot as well. But there's that during those shutdown period years, I was in the classroom as a classroom music teacher, teaching people. For me at the time, it was very important for young people to put an instrument in their hands and make music. Because human beings have been communicating through sound since the very beginning. And I don't want the next generation to lose that.
And it's funny, not everybody thought that way because the pandemic was like a total shutdown. A lot of folks said, oh, well, no instruments because of the virus. We don't know how it's going to be transmitted. So a lot of students, a lot of young talent didn't have that opportunity unless they could own their own instrument. So I didn't know you was teaching during that time. That's great.
Yeah. I went ahead on my first year. I was at this place, Fort Hamilton, in high school in Brooklyn, and I was doing my teaching credential in the evenings. So I had a full-time teaching position during the day. I ended up being like a full-time substitute teacher, but basically I had all the same responsibilities as somebody else. I just had to get my license while I was doing my first year of teaching at the same time. It was crazy. I don't recommend doing it that way, but I did it, And then, for 2 more years, I was, full-time at a school up in Astoria, the Young Women's Leadership School of Astoria. I was their sole music teacher for 2 years.
Okay. Well, speaking of being a music teacher, I think being a teacher and a band leader kind of goes hand in hand because you're kind of doing the same thing. And you have a group. When I lived in New York, I knew you put together this group and you was working really hard with Paul Beaudry Pathways.
That's right.
Tell us about that project.
Yeah. So what happened was, as you can see, not everybody has that passion to teach as much as they have that passion to play. I happen to have both. So we were doing a lot of stuff for the U.S. State Department, and they were looking for bands that can tour to be cultural ambassadors, showing jazz in other countries, which is incredible because, as jazz musicians, our ability to bring in sounds and mix other cultures with jazz and our improvisatory spirit to transform it and then to make it into something else. So what we would do is that we would go into other countries and like when we were in Trinidad, we would find like a local song from Trinidad and then we would transform it and then that would become part of our repertoire.
Right.
And then we would go to Honduras and we would do the same thing and we would find a local song from Honduras and then make that a part of our repertoire. Well, a couple of years went by, almost our entire repertoire were songs that were from other countries that we had done like some kind of jazz arrangement or some other kind of stuff on. And so we have this international catalog from about 20 different countries that we've been to. Every time we go to a new country, we grab a new song. And so like the second record that Pathways made was called Americas. And I called it Americas because it's, as a lot of times when people say America, they only think about the United States. But, Central America is America as well. South America is America as well. The Caribbean is America as well. It's all America. And that's why I call it Americas, because this is all the Americas. And it's got, you have a common thread of lots of immigration had taken place through, history, for better or for worse. There's a lot of immigrants, and mixing cultures. And so you go throughout the Caribbean, it's amazing because, every island has different rhythms. There's similarities, and yet there's very distinct differences. You know, even between like Cuba and Puerto Rico, for instance, you know, or between Jamaica and St. Thomas. And you can tell me yourself, and they're all got their distinct flavor. And then you go into Central America, you find the same thing. You go into Brazil, you find the same thing. And even regionally in certain areas, like when we were doing some music of Argentina, you know, everyone's familiar with tango, but then they have this other style that they play up in the upper mountains, in the hillsides. I guess what you would call it the hillbilly side, you know, but it's actually a very, very rhythmically complex style. And it was so complicated, even with some of the best players in New York, we were having a hard time trying to find one because the rhythm was kept moving all over the place. It was like, whoa, you know. But yeah, so when I put Pathways together, that band was incredible. And we still play every now and then, not as much as I would like. And it was another one that the pandemic just completely screwed up our schedule, and everybody had to try to get back to where they were. But that's a group that's got a lot of great chemistry. Pathways made a couple of records. Another person I had really great chemistry with was a guitar player. Even before I put Pathways together, there's a guitar player named Adam Rafferty. We used to do a lot of duets, and the last record that I ended up putting out actually was some tracks I had recorded with Adam Rafferty back in 2009. And then, but I always wanted to add, I always look at myself still as a composer and an arranger and a producer. So I took some of those duo tracks that I did with Adam, and I started adding strings to it, adding some other instruments to it, and doing all the kind of stuff that because I was always being hired as a producer for someone else. So all the tricks I wanted to do on everybody else's record, I never got a chance to do. I'll do it on my own record. And so the last record,
practice on everybody else and applied it on yours. Huh?
Yeah, you know what I mean. So I did all my goodies on the record that came out in 2018 with Adam Rafferty. But Pathways had a great chemistry. Me and Adam have a great chemistry, and chemistries are important. Like when we talk about the history of jazz, like Bird and Diz, you know, or great rhythm sections, drummers and bass players in particular, like you and Reuben Rogers, you got a thing. You know, you and Kenny Davis, you got a thing, and I mean, you can work on your instrument, but there's a special thing that happens when you have a chemistry that really drives, you know, how everything is going to sound.
Yeah. And I know you've been working with Darryl Green and Camille Thurman with their group. And so you guys have, almost 10 years together?
We got 10 years together. That's a nice chemistry right there. I love playing with that band. Me and Darryl, man, I mean, that's like one of the best, you know, I mean, because after that amount of time, when the chemistry is right, and then you add 10 years to that, you know, things happen that, you know, I would love to have happen on every other bandstand that takes place. But, you know, I think it's also, that's where you develop, you know, when you have a chance to develop like that, then you can actually bring that to other stages, but you have to develop it with the person that you have a chemistry with before you can do it anywhere else. You know, and so, that rhythmical relationship I have with Darryl is a very deep one. And I'm very thankful to have it because, like, you know, it's very few and far in between when you have that kind of thing where you can say, oh, I can grow as a musician with this particular person. You know, you can count those on one hand, no matter how
great. The other thing too is the other challenge that I see out here with the industry is that there's not that many bands in existence.
It's hard to have a band.
That's a claim, but it's like, you know, you're playing with who's available to make the gig at the time versus a working band. You know, when I first got to New York, there were working bands, and it was so excited to go hear the bands play because it was so cohesive and the synergy was amazing.
Absolutely.
You know, this saying like, "Oh, it's good enough for jazz." That's kind of what we get now when you go and you hear the band, and there's a bunch of great cats playing. But, you know, if the chemistry is not always balanced, you know, but so
it's also
it's important, you know?
Because it's also like agents get involved and promoters get involved and they say, well, we think you should play with a bunch of all-stars. It's like, but my guys are going to do something that the all-stars are not going to do. You know, and let me bring my guys on that gig. And if you stand your ground, like what you have done with the 21st Century Band, you know, you didn't just pander to someone who said, well, you know, you need to have a bunch of names. You know,
well, I've had that, and I've literally was like, well, this is the band.
And then over time, every single member person in your band has become a name.
They have become a
partially
name,
because of that, because you stood your ground.
Yeah.
And if they weren't names before, they're names
But you
now.
know, I find it interesting because in the jazz world, that pattern of just putting artists together is just is that's the norm.
Mhm.
But in the pop world or in the rock
Yeah,
world,
nobody
or I
else
mean,
does that.
even if you go back to the history of Motown, they were bands. I
They
mean,
were bands.
that's what created the industry, the
They created the
consistency
industry. That's right.
of the music.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of the lost art form. The consistency of the music is something that, and we've gotten used to it. It's like just okay, and it's great to just see special projects, but
Mhm.
it's really good to have consistency across the board as well.
And I think that's what carries over time. When you listen to a record that was done 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, more often than not, it was from a band. You
Right.
know, every
Yeah.
now and then you get a nice group of all-stars where you're like, well, that was a special project and that was just a moment in time, and I'm just
Right.
glad it happened. But I
Right.
want to say it's 75% of your favorite records are going to be bands.
Yeah, because you could say you went to hear the Messengers playing. Which Messengers? The one with Lee Morgan, or the one with Freddie Hubbard, or the one you could account for the lineage of the group,
That's right.
and hear the evolution of the music as well through that process because of the consistency.
Because of the consistency.
Because
One
of
of
the
my favorite
consistency. Yeah.
one of my favorite CDs. So I guess still have CDs, right? There was one that was called Live Train, and it was the John Coltrane Quartet from like the live European tours from like I want to say 1961 to like 1965 or so.
Mhm.
And it was like the very first tour that you had McCoy Tyner and Jimmy Garrison had just joined the band, Jimmy Garrison, McCoy Tyner, and Elvin Jones. And you can hear like on concert number 1, they were still playing in a way that was, you would say, somewhat conventional. But over time, you start hearing what you eventually hear on A Love Supreme.
Right.
And, if they had replaced the band every year, it wouldn't have never gotten to that point.
Yeah.
But to hear the evolution and to hear the mistakes too was great, because sometimes they don't always
But
come
that's part
back
of
out.
growth. That's part of growth. That's all part of it. And that's the beauty of it, because consistency leads to success. I mean, yes, we have different ways of getting to be successful, but I think that's just one of the challenges we have in the music. I really think if we can revert back to that level and appreciate bands, especially from the industry adaptation, it would really help the industry. But I don't think that's the practice that one wants to pursue, so I think that, but I think as artists, we have to fight for that as well.
We have to fight for that.
Yeah, we have to fight for that, because I mean, like for instance, John Faddis, I've been playing with John Faddis for 34 years. It's amazing when we get in the bandstand, the things that happen. We just a look and just take the music in a different direction.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
And funny about the John Coltrane quartet, I hope you don't mind me saying, I used to always feel for Jimmy Garrison, because here, the first solo is going to be John Coltrane at his height. The next solo is going to be McCoy Tyner at his height. Elvin is playing stuff that's never been played before, and I'm always like, "What's Jimmy going to play?"
Right. No, he found his way. He created a whole those double stops and all of that stuff came out of nowhere. I mean, bass players weren't really doing that before that. All of that stuff.
He might play something that might wipe out Train and McCoy's solo.
Yeah.
It's like, how did you come up with that? I mean, it was, and it leaves me speechless. Some of the stuff that Jimmy played, but that's chemistry.
You get inspired. You get inspired. Yeah. Well, speaking of playing, you shared some of your music with us, and I, looking at the time, I want to jump into that because we could talk forever, but I know our audience is like, okay, well, let's hear this guy's music. So one of the first song you shared with us is a song entitled 8414.
8414. The 8414 was my first address in Queens. It's a typical Queens address right next to 84th Street. And so in that particular song, I'm trying to convey the feeling of having moved to New York for the first time, and the congestion, the traffic, the subways, a million people going to a million places all at the same time. But overall, I wanted to convey a feeling of excitement with that particular song, and that became our opener for Pathways almost every concert. It was 8414.
Okay, well, let's check it out. 8414.
Oh, come on, buddy.
I like that.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Hustle and bustle of New York City.
Hustle and bustle of New York. You can hear the subways going by.
So you got, would you call your style progressive jazz?
Oh, wow, that's funny. I think some I want to say some jazz historians would probably call it that, but Dion, why don't you help me with this? We don't really like to categorize, but yeah, I think if it was going to go into a category, you would pretty much call it that. But we're not really thinking that. We're just thinking music, and then we let the other people give it a label. I'm not really concerned as to what the label actually is. But if you were to give it a name, it would fall into that category.
Yeah. I mean, it's more modernish jazz than the traditional side of it. Things.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Great.
So that's another question. Do you only play the upright bass? So I do play electric bass as well. As a matter of fact, I think one of the tracks that you might be playing later, I'm playing an acoustic bass guitar, which is, it's a guitar, but it's an acoustic bass guitar as opposed to the electric bass or the upright bass. but that's a whole nother discussion. I was telling you offline that I was getting a lot more into sound healing and playing sound healing instruments, which is another discussion in itself entirely. But I did go through a period where I wanted to know a little bit about every instrument. You know, I wanted to, because I was really into writing, you know, so I did play a little bit of violin. I played a little bit of trumpet, a little bit of trombone, a little bit of clarinet, a little bit of still play piano for the sake of composing. Drums was my first instrument. And so I just wanted to play a little bit of every instrument. So when I was writing for that instrument, I would have a firsthand knowledge of what it's like to be the player looking at it. Right. To, you know, so I can look at it from the player's point of view. If I'm writing for a big band, I know what the saxophone player is thinking. I know what the trumpet player is thinking. I know what the trombone player is thinking, and everyone else.
Yeah, one of our listeners asked, how do you arrange something like this? I mean, keep it short because we're trying to squeeze some music in.
So when I'm trying to arrange, I'm still, you know, I got my first, well, when I was at Berkeley, I did my degree in classical composition. So I'm always thinking from a composer's, arranger's perspective, how many different colors can I get out of, let's say, 4 people? You know, now in this case, we just had the melody on saxophone, and it was pretty straightforward. But in some of the other songs that you'll hear that we're going to be playing later, you'll start hearing some different varieties and some different colors. I'm looking for as many colors as I can get from a band.
Great. Well, let's continue with the music for the sake of time, because these are great comments and we could really dive deep into them. But for the sake of time, so you shared another song. Let's just jump right in it, then we could talk about it afterwards. This is entitled Little Julian. Little
Julian. I'm going to be playing acoustic bass guitar on this one. This is a live concert that happened in New York several years ago, just before the pandemic shut down. This is with Adam Rafferty on guitar, and I have a string quartet with me that you can't see on screen. Khalil Kwame Bell is with me on percussion, and Charenee Wade is actually singing at the very end. No, on this one. Oh, actually, no. This one, okay, this one comes from the record. Little Julian is actually, it was actually played at that show as well, but this comes from my 2018 record called New Tomorrows. It's a trio.
Yeah. Let's check it out. Little Julian. That's Little Julian.
Yeah, that's funny because Julian's the name of my son. And when I first wrote that song, he was about maybe 3 or 4 years old. And, you know, as 4-year-olds do, they're jumping on the sofas, they're running all over the place. You get to that period of age where they just run. That's all they do. They just run for like 3 years. From the age 3 to age 6, they just run. And then, but it's funny, once Julian was about 16, he was taller than me. So I became Little Paul. He called me Shorty from that point forward.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah, the tables turned, but that's my son Julian.
Great. And the guitar player on that is
Adam Rafferty.
Yeah.
He's living in Austria now, but he's a jazz guitar player and moved to Austria later on. He ended up going into fingerstyle guitar, but we're in contact. He's one of my best friends, and he's still doing a lot of great things in Europe right now.
Great. And that's got Lil Bell on percussion and of course you on bass doing your thing. Great, man. Well, let's keep going, man. This next one is really nice. It's very unique. You shared some really unique music, unconventional that we normally hear. That's what I'm enjoying about this. The next song is called Lugano.
Okay, I was in Lugano, Switzerland, and I was inspired to write this tune. And then I had a sketch. I went ahead and finished it when I was at home. And this is one where I wanted to add the string quartet. So on this one, you actually have 8 people playing. Even on the live version, you got a string quartet plus myself and Adam, and then Khalil Kwame Bell and Charenee Wade is singing at the end because I did like a little vocal thing at the end of the song.
Great. Let's check it out. Lugano.
Lugano.
La, la. I like that.
I got the whole place going. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that was great, man. I love it. And Charenee is one of my favorite, man.
She's incredible. She's like one of the best of her generation, hands down. She's amazing.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Well, man, we're running out of time. I want to jump right into the last song, if you don't mind, man.
Yeah, so this one's called
Love.
Mr. Henderson. It was my tribute to Joe Henderson because I used to see him a lot in San Francisco. So I really had Joe Henderson's sound in mind when I wrote this. And this is Pathways recorded this back in 2010.
Okay, let's check this out. Mr. Henderson. I can hear Mr. Henderson.
Yeah. It sounded like Joe Henderson, right?
Yeah, that's straight up
Yeah.
Joe Henderson. Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
man.
And the band is great, man. Who are the band members?
So you got Tim Armacost on saxophone, Bennett Pastor on piano, and Tony Jefferson on drums. That quartet, the four of us, that was called chemistry right there. I think that was like a first take on that one that you just heard. That was a band that everything we played just sounded great. You know,
Yeah, great
incredible
band.
band.
Great band. Well, Paul, our time is up, unfortunately. But it's man, it's such a pleasure having you on the show and catching up with you, man. It's been a minute. Before I let you go, let our audience know how they can follow you, how they can contact you, stay in touch, any social media website.
Right. Well, the best way is just to go to www.paulbeaudry.com. That's PAULBEAUDRY.com and pronounced Beaudry. I've heard every pronunciation that you can think of my last name. Beau, like a violin bow, Beaudry.
I was going to say Boudreaux, but
I know.
I was messing with that. But,
We can go off another 5 minutes just on that one.
I know. That's great, man. But again, thank you, man. Listen, guys, please support Paul and his music and the great things that he's doing. And Paul, again, thank you, man. It's really been a pleasure catching up with you. It's been a while, and look forward to seeing you in December.
I look forward to seeing you soon. All right, take care of yourself.
Sir.
All
man,
right.
you take care. Thanks for sharing your music and your story and your philosophy, and we have more to talk about. So we definitely will visit you again. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
That's the great Paul Beaudry sharing his music and love for the music with us. And yeah, man, support him and check him out. Up next, we have another amazing musician coming up next week joining us. This gentleman is a trombonist, amazing trombonist. Got to know him over the years, and he's doing some incredible stuff and playing his behind off. So come back next week and join me as I welcome to Sound of the Diaspora, the one and only Mr. Chris Glassman. See you guys next week. You take care. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your support. All the best. Have a